Hey, everybody, and welcome to day 4 of TBRCon. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, I'm not Michael Maymay. He actually had a little bit of a personal matter he had to take care of this morning, so I am stepping in for him. But I just wanted to throw out kind of his stuff for you guys since he wasn't able to be here. So he is the author of the Planet Side series from Harper Voyager. He actually has a new book coming out next month called The Misfit Soldier. So definitely go check out his stuff, and we wish Mike the best and hate that he couldn't be here. But luckily enough, he was nice enough to hand me questions for today's panel. So the panel that I am moderating currently is Why Do You Write? But before we get into that, I want everybody to kind of introduce themselves, just say a little bit about yourself and so forth. So Zach, we'll start with you.
All right. Hi, I'm Zach Topping. I'm a military science fiction writer, and my first book is Wake of War, and it's a near future military thriller that'll be out July 19th from Forge Books.
All right, Nia.
Hi, I'm Nia. I write science fiction and fantasy. My debut is called The Blood Trials. It's a blend of sci-fi and fantasy where like future and tech converge on an off-world planet. It'll be out from Harper Voyager on the US side April 4th and on the UK side April 14th.
Awesome. CJ?
Sorry, I haven't unmuted myself. I'm such a tech idiot. Right. Hiya, I'm CJ Tudor. I'm the author of 4 novels. I think it's 4. The Chalk Man, which was out in 2018. The Taking of Annie Thorne, The Other People, and my most recent book is The Burning Girls, which is out now. And yeah, they're kind of a mixture of horror and psychological thriller. And yeah, they've all done all right. So it's great. My new book, The Drift, won't be out till January 2023 now as well. And I've got a short story collection coming out this year too. So it's all cool.
Awesome. Tom?
Hello, I'm Tom Lloyd. I'm the author of 14 books now. My best known being probably The Stormcaller. And my most recent one is a science fiction novella called Falling Dark, which has just come out.
Awesome. And Rob?
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm the author of an absolute set ton of books. I don't even know how many I've got at this moment. It's somewhere in the teens, I think. Things like mostly fantasy with a little bit of sci-fi as well. So,
well, thanks everybody for. And I guess I can introduce myself. So I'm David Walters. I am the organizer of TBRCon. If you didn't already know that, I also run the book review website fanfightaddict.com. I don't have any books out. Sorry. Maybe eventually might have an anthology kind of kicking around at some point. So kind of keep your eyes out. Other than that, I'm just a husband, a father, and I work a full-time job in telecom. So I'm pretty boring, actually. But I just want to thank everybody that's here on the panel for being here. So the first question I've got, and it's probably one you're already expecting. Why did you start writing? And Tom, I want to start with you.
Okay. Well, like an idiot, because that's mostly what I am. I started writing to avoid work, which makes no sense at all. But it made sense when I was 18 and really stupid. So I finished school and my parents were threatening to make me get a job. So I thought if I sit in my room and do something, then they'll forget I'm there pretty much. So I started writing a book. And yeah, carried on since then somehow.
Nia, what about you?
Wow, I don't. It's an easy question, but a interesting question because I feel like I've always been a writer in some like way, shape, or form, even from like early childhood years. So I started writing just because I love stories, and I love reading stories, and I love crafting stories, and I love telling stories. And it was just kind of became this compulsive need that just wouldn't let me go, to try my hand at writing the types of stories that I like to read, and here we are.
What about you, Rob?
yeah, I mean, well, I was always sort of a bit of a dreamer. Like even back at the school days, I remember like I was the one staring out the window, and like teachers were always just like, he's so distracted all the time. And I'm like, you would be too if you could see the dragons. So it just kind of it was a natural progression. I just sort of I went from just sort of dreaming all these things and worlds and everything to then having characters and then whole stories. And I just thought, I want to do something with this. I want to tell these stories. I want to share them with other people. So that's why I sort of started putting pen to paper, and there we go.
Gotcha. What about you, CJ?
I feel like Rob, actually. I was an only child, and I used to live in like a total fantasy world as a kid. I literally every day I was sort of making up different versions of reality that I was living in, because I think I used to get bored. And I guess I think it used to stem from there, making up these stories. It's really weird, isn't it? It's hard to think back to how it started, but probably then. And I used to write stories when I was quite young. I remember writing like these little stories I used to make into little booklets to give to some younger cousins. And I'd make them all up, and I'd draw pictures and draw a cover and everything. And they're probably really rubbish, but yes, I think it started there. It's just loving writing. But I think I loved reading as well, and I think the two go hand in hand, don't they? I was quite a precocious reader, and I used to love Enid Blyton and things. And then I moved on to I think probably Agatha Christie when I was quite young, and I used to read lots of real ghost stories and Stephen King by the time I was probably about 11. And I think that it sort of inspired me. I wanted to kind of do that. Just love telling stories, really, and making stuff up, because it's fun making stuff up.
And what about you, Zach?
It kind of similar. I mean, I've always had an active imagination, and I mean, as a kid, I was compelled to find empty notebooks and just fill them with stories, and they were all totally derivative of the things that I loved at the time. Whatever movie I just watched or whatever book I was reading, but I was drawn to it. And then over the years, as adulthood creeps in, some of those creative endeavors are kind of, put to the side, but I'd still periodically, write things, whether it's a character description or plot idea or something. I was always doing it. And then later, once life settled out a little bit, I got back into it just because, again, I was compelled, and I realized that it's something you can work at, something you can practice, in a skill like weightlifting or throwing a baseball. And for whatever reason, with no end goal in mind at first, I just I'm going to write a story and we'll just print it out and put it on the shelf, and that's it. And then, one thing led to another, and, here we are. So.
Gotcha. So for those of you that, maybe started at a young age, either you're creating and putting to paper, whether it was actually words or just pictures and so forth, did you continue that through like your teen and older years? Did you take a break from it at some point and then come back to writing because you enjoyed it so much when you were younger? Nia, we'll start with you.
So I think I've always been drawn to stories, and I've always been drawn to telling stories. In my teen years and in college, I was a theater kid, and then in college, my major was biology, but my minor was theater arts, and I did a lot of concentration in, playwriting, because I was so drawn to telling stories. And for a minute, when I was minoring in theater arts, I thought I wanted to be an actress, and that's why I was so drawn to telling these stories and creating whole worlds and characters and settings and set dressing. And then I think after I graduated, I kind of figured out that it's not actually the protagonist that I want to be. I kind of want to be the puppet master behind the protagonist, that's like making them dance and, moving all of these critical players into peace and building up this amazing, massive world around them. I think I just visited my dad in DC like 2 months ago, and he had stories from when I was like 4. It was of the Big Bad Wolf, but the Big Bad Wolf was actually this really evil monster that wanted to eat not just the pig's hearts, but everybody's hearts. So I'm like, I've always been like a fantasy person. And then I think he threw me another one where there were 2 best friends, and one went to a sleepover, and like the boyfriend was like this deranged murderer who had a twin that had just got out of jail for like going on like a Michael Myers spree, and they didn't know, and so they swapped out identities. And I was like 17 at the time. I think it was for like AP Lit class, and I'm sure my AP Lit teacher was not know what she was about to get, and was not looking for that type of fictional narrative, but it's what she got. So I've always written stories. I think in college, writing fiction and novels scaled back, and I did a lot of play writing and play analysis. And then once I graduated college, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. I have like 4 degrees, and nothing was actually really sticking. I have a bio major. I have a public health master's. I have a master's in teaching, but nothing felt right. So at some point I was like, you know what? I really love reading. I really love writing. I'm drawn to that medium. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book and actually try to see if this can become, a professional thing.
I gotcha. So just out there for all those AP Lit teachers, like, just expect the worst and and hope for the best.
Pretty much.
Rob, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of like I moved in and out of it for a long time. The first story I actually remember writing. I think I was about 13 years old, and I wrote this weird little fiction piece about a character who everything goes wrong in his life and he has a mental breakdown. So happy fluffy type stuff. Bit weird for a 13-year-old to be writing now, I think. And then I just sort of I wrote a few sort of short stories here and there, a bit of fan fiction. I wrote some really terrible Star Wars fan fiction, which was just like an excuse to have lightsaber fights for fun. And then just sort of moving in and out. I'd pick it up for a year or so, and I'd write a few short stories, and then drop it for another couple of years. I remember I was writing some werewolf type stuff, and then I started playing World of Warcraft, and then it was like 5 years later, and but it wasn't until I went to Fiji to do some marine research because I was trying to be a zoologist at the time. I got a degree in zoology and thought, hey, I'll follow this path. And while I was out there, I took this leather-bound journal with me, and I just started writing a bunch of stories in it. And it turned out they were all set in the same world, and it was all just building on this world. And by the time I sort of finished my 3-month tour of swimming and diving and looking at all sorts of magical beasts underwater, I had this idea of just, this is the world, I want to write it. So I just sort of, at that point, I came home, bought myself a new computer to work on, got myself a job, and just, that's it. I'm writing this world. And that turned into my debut trilogy in the end. So here we go.
I gotcha. I love how you said I started playing World of Warcraft, and then it was 5 years later.
Yeah, that was just 5 years. My life just disappeared.
All right, CJ, what about you?
I wrote to my teens. I mean, I remember doing lots of writing in my teens. I had a very supportive English teacher, Mr. Webster, who used to lend me classic ghost stories and things like that I used to read. And he once wrote on one of my essays, "If you do not become a best-selling author or prime minister, I will be very disappointed." And, I'd not really got political ambitions, but it took me well over kind of 30 years on that to get published. So, but we got there in the end. But then, I kind of left it a bit in my 20s, I think. I had jobs where I kind of wrote. I was a trainee journalist. I mean, I left school at 16. I haven't got any qualifications really, apart from sort of my GCSEs. I didn't go to college. I didn't go to university. I've never done any writing courses. Kind of everything I learned about writing, I learned through reading, really. But I had a job as a trainee reporter for a while. Then I worked as a radio copywriter. I worked in sort of advertising for a bit. I did a bit of TV presenting. I've had a many and varied career. I've done lots of things to avoid having a proper job again, But the writing kind of fell by the wayside. My 20s were a bit of a mess as well. Rubbish relationships, various, dramas going on and things. And I didn't really come back to it till my 30s to kind of knuckle down and try and do it properly. I think I thought, oh God, I've got to try and do something. I've got to try and finish something, because I was a great starter of novels. I'd start stuff and I'd have a shiny new idea and I'd want to go and write that. And I never actually finished anything. So my first job was to knuckle down in my mid-30s to kind of finish something. And I did, and it was absolute crap. And I put it to one side, but I'd got to the end of it, which was kind of important. I didn't abandon it halfway through. But it's, it took me a long, long time to get published. I mean, I kept at it in my 30s, and I got myriads of rejections and close but no cigars. And I had an agent at one point, and then that didn't work because they wanted me to write one type of thing and I wanted to write another type of thing. I left them, which at the time I thought was a really stupid thing to do, but it kind of worked out in the end. But it took me till I was 46 to get published. I was trying for well over a decade. But I'd still be writing if I hadn't got published. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? I liked doing the writing. I persevered. I kind of had to write. You know, I wanted to get published, but I didn't know if it was ever going to happen. But it did, which is good. So yay.
I know a lot of people like had probably the same type of 20s where things just kind of went haywire. You didn't really know what was going on, and then 30s you're like, all right, let's start kind of getting back on the roll.
Yeah, they're wiped from my mind a little bit. My 20s.
yeah. But I mean, you know, it led you to be, you know, known as UK's female Stephen King. So you know what?
It's not bad,
right? Yeah, I mean, it kind of
deserve it, but it's not bad.
It feels pretty good. So,
That's pretty good.
All right, Tom, what about you?
Well, before I actually started writing, I didn't think about it at all. I remember once, like in an English class, we were given assignments, and it was I can't remember how old I was, maybe 12 or something, and it was write a story based off this picture, so it's a fantasy picture, and my brain went, oh yes, I like this. This is fun. And so I can't remember how long this assignment went on. Every week we had a different picture, and we had to do a continuous story for that. And that was almost the one time I paid attention in English. After that, my brain went away again. There was nothing dragging it back. So yeah, when I started writing, it was really a surprise that I was even doing it, let alone that I stuck with it. Because a bit like Rob, I'd been playing Warhammer for years before that, and so that was my sort of overriding obsession. And there wasn't really space for anything else in my head there. And then I got to university, I got a job, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I carried on writing while I sort of bummed around getting a degree, because you might as well get a degree if you can. And I was just about clever enough to get one. And I got a job in publishing because books are cool. So let's do something involving that. And I carried on in sort of low-level jobs in publishing, not being very good at it, and writing while I was sort of in my spare time. So it's actually, well, even these days, there's quite a lot of I'm working so I can sort of spend the time to write. And I mean, I still work in publishing now, 20 years later. But to a degree, it's a means to an end. And I still have no idea how I actually sort of fixed on writing as the thing I wanted to do. But it happened, and why would I stop?
And what about you, Zach?
Yeah, I wrote a lot in elementary school, like I said, because I loved creating up my own stories. Like my imagination was always churning, and I had this outlet to put them down. Get to high school, and high school things kind of get in the way, and I didn't really have a plan for college, so I ended up joining the Army, as one does. And again, being creative wasn't exactly the forefront of my focus at the time, even though every once in a while there'd be fits and starts where I'd just have this idea or something that I'd be compelled to write. But then you get out, and again, early 20s or through my 20s, life kind of comes at you in all different directions, and eventually things settled down to where I could get back into it and start focusing. That was, I would just start, I got back into reading, right? Things got settled down. I moved into a house at the end of a dead end street with my wife. We were just dating at the time, but it was quiet, nice backyard. And I could come home from work and sit in the backyard and just read. And it was nice to just kind of have that settling. And I'd find that I'd start like daydream, how I'd be reading and pause and go, how would I write the end of this chapter? How would I write this book? And the same creativity started kind of churning again in my head. And so I started, that's when I started writing. And like anyone who's tried, the first few attempts are either not finished or they're absolute garbage. And I would realize, I'd be writing something, I'd realize, oh, what I'm doing wrong. Oh, this is totally wrong. So I'd throw it aside and I'd write something new, but implementing that thing that I just learned from that previous, iteration. And I did that for a while until I realized, like CJ, I'm not finishing anything. I got to finish something. So I did that. And somehow, and that was Wake of War, ended up getting an agent. And as the week that I signed with my agent for Wake of War, I also got hired at a local career fire department. So then I had to leave my other job and go to the Connecticut Fire Academy. So that was like, that's 16 weeks of learning a whole new career and super intense. It's like another boot camp, So writing was, I took a huge pause there, knowing that I'd have to get back into it. But again, it's just something that I'm compelled to do and I'm drawn to do it. And I love doing it. And there are moments that you don't love, but like any relationship, you gotta, work on those parts and know that it's gonna be fruitful and move forward. And, eventually you'll have a book. So yeah, I don't know. I just keep doing it.
I gotcha. So I know CJ kind of touched on this just a little bit, but I was curious. Do any of y'all remember like a specific teacher, whether it was in elementary or high school, that like pushed you to write? And have you touched base with them since you published a work or are about to publish a work, just to gauge their reaction? And anybody can take this one.
Yeah, I do. When CJ mentioned that, I thought of it. It was my fifth. I was in the integrated day program. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. It's where they take two separate grades and mix them together, and it's like a hybrid classroom. And that was fourth and fifth grade, and her name is Mrs. Weaver. And I mean, I'm friends with her on Facebook. We reach out here and there and let her know. But yeah, she definitely inspired that. It was a very creative environment. We always had freedom to use our imagination and use that to help us learn. And we learned a lot in that class without realizing we were learning, because it wasn't the rigid sit straight, face forward, listen to the lecture and then read the book. It was a much more open, creative environment. And we would, yeah. And it was around the time that I started filling notebooks with stories. Yeah. Miss Weaver's class.
Interesting. Anybody else?
I never tracked down Mr. Webster. I've got to say, I have a friend. We try to find him on social media and stuff and everything, but sadly, we can't seem to find him, which doesn't bode well, really. Actually, does it? But he was a good source of encouragement, and I loved English so much. I was never very good at maths and sciences, but making stuff up was something that I could do. But it's just great if you have a teacher who really does encourage you like that and sees that spark and excites you about, what you're doing, which is great.
Yeah. Tom or Rob, I think one of y'all wanted to.
Yeah, but I didn't have a teacher who sort of particularly pushed me. But my last English teacher, before I gave up the subject because I was bad at it, a guy called Roger Fuben, he was interesting solely, well, not solely, but specifically for the fact that he saw real value in it, in English in itself, in why words were enjoyable. And clearly he did writing. I think he wrote some poetry in his spare time. But in a sort of English public school, it's a pretty stuffy environment, and actually the value of the arts is not really highly appreciated there, because they want you to go and get a job in finance or something. So just seeing a teacher who said, keep a notebook, put ideas down in it, anything that sort of strikes your mind, and just the whole attitude that was very different to most other teachers in that environment, of this could be something of value that doesn't have to be a specific purpose to it. And that really stuck in my mind, even though I wasn't giving up the subject. And so a couple of years later, I then started to write. And it was very much, because of there was someone showing that didn't matter exactly where it went, just trying something.
Rob, you got anything?
I mean, the only thing I had a very different experience of school, and the only teacher that really ever stuck with me was one who said, "You'll never amount to anything. You're going to be stuck in a dead-end job for the rest of your life." So I took that to heart with the idea of "fuck you, no, I won't."
There you go. What about you, Nia? I have to imagine it was that AP Lit teacher, right?
Yeah, I was just Mrs. Skinner. That was her name, and I will have to look her up. And I actually used to teach in the same district a couple years ago, and send her a thank you, because while she got some wild stories for me, she was the kind of woman who walked into our AP Lit the first day of class, and she was a white woman herself, and she was like, "I don't read books by old dead white men." And that was the first time I've ever heard like any adult in my life actually say that in an academic setting. And so then we got this amazing syllabus that was The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver and Sula and Song of Solomon. And it was the first time I ever read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And she just, we just got all of these different multicultural works from across the world that I'd never actually been exposed to until the AP Lit class. Because until then, I was always that like A+ like gifted student that was in like the honors and AP English tracks. Because I've always loved reading and I've always loved writing, but until then, a lot of our curriculum was, the tried and true canon that you would get over and over again, which I have works from that I love too. But she really showed me like nurtured the fact when I kind of went off track and was like giving her all of this genre stuff back writing that wasn't necessarily literary. And she, and it, I mean, as an educator, she could have been like, what are you doing? This was not the assignment, right? Like, you need to go back and try again. But she very much nurtured it and was enthusiastic about it. It was like, show me the next thing, or like, I'm excited to read the next thing. So like, she was one teacher, but I think the most pivotal teacher in my life was my grandmother, who taught for 20 something odd years. And I never sat in a classroom with her, but she kind of made home be the classroom because I lived with her and my mom. And so they have this story now that my family likes to tell of when I was 3. And I was sitting at a dining room table beside her, and she was like, this was when teachers had like handwritten out lesson plans, right? So she was like writing out this lesson plan, and I had an open notebook and I was scribbling. It wasn't actual letters, it was just like squiggly lines because I'm 3 years old. And she's like, what are you writing? And I told her I'm writing a story, and I literally gave her a full 3-act hero's journey structure from beginning to end, and then could go back and recite that to like the rest of the family that asked me behind her, even though there were no actual words on the page. This is all in my head, right? But it just my grandmother and my entire family have just been very much supportive and like formative, and just they buy into my shenanigans, and they always have when I'm like creating these like fictitious worlds and characters. And I think it was Rob, you were in school and you're like, yeah, this isn't interesting because there's a dragon outside the window. Like, I was that kid that was like, I don't care about the real world because the world spinning inside of my head is much more interesting.
I gotcha. Question. So has there been a time when you simply just stopped writing? Why? And then why did you decide to go back? Especially like maybe towards like the beginning of your, I guess, writing career, like when you decided to start taking it seriously, if you stopped, why, and why did you come back to it? And Rob, we'll start with you.
Not really. I mean, ever since I started writing with the sort of like the aim to be an author, basically, that was, I don't know, maybe 11, 12 years ago now. I've always been writing. There's been a few sort of blips where, personal life has got me down or whatever, and I've struggled to get to it, but nothing any longer than like a couple of months. I've been writing for about 12 years solid now, which is why I've got so many books out.
That's why you can't keep count.
I know.
How about you, Zach?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, big life changes. I had a career change that kind of put it on pause. That was probably the biggest point that I'd stopped, because then after the fire academy, you spend an entire year in your department on probation, where you have to memorize every street in your district. You have to memorize every piece of equipment you have and how to use it. There's a lot of memorization, a lot of practical skills, a whole new lifestyle I had to learn. But even though I paused writing, I knew that was what it was. It was just a pause. I had absolutely no intention of stopping. Like I said, always been compelled to write, and I'm in a position now where, I got an agent with a book, and the book's going to be getting published, and I'm lucky enough to have a few more books coming out. I don't think I'll ever actually stop, whether people stop reading what I write or caring about it, or if they start, since my book's not even out yet, we'll see how that goes first. Yeah, no, I can't say, once I started getting into it and know that it was something I wanted to get better at and see if I could really do it, it's just constant, whether it's every day or every other day, or I have to pause. But like I said, I know that it's just a brief hiatus, and then I'll get back to it. But I try to stay diligent.
I gotcha. What about you, CJ?
Well, I mean, obviously I had my 20s where I, didn't really write much at all. When I started kind of trying to do it seriously, which was my mid-30s by that point, I don't think I've ever really stopped. I've always been writing something. I was quite, I desperately wanted to get published in my 30s, and I had such a bad experience with an agent. I got quite badly burnt by that. I think this was a particular agent who told me that kind of my mix of horror and thriller just wasn't publishable, to quote. So who also, though, I have to say, was very, that could have been sort of agent you meet later years when you've had a success and gone, yeah, it was. But actually was very, very kind. One of the first people to congratulate me when I sort of got my contract for the Chalkman. But yeah, I've had periods where I haven't written as much. I mean, when I had my daughter at 41, so I was on quite a late start on everything, really. And so for sort of the first couple of years, because they're quite hard work, children, I didn't write as much. But I was still writing. I used to write short stories because, we needed the cash, really, as well. We were quite skint at the time. So I was trying to do a bit of freelance writing, and I sold a few short stories to some women's magazines, and that gave me a bit of extra cash, which was great. But they did get a point, I think, actually, before I wrote the Chalkman, where I did think, certainly on the novel writing side, am I ever going to get that break? Was that agent that I had the chance to get the break, and that didn't work? And perhaps I'm not going to get that break again. And I'll just have to keep pootling along with these short stories and stuff. And when I wrote the Chalkman, actually, I was running a dog walking business because, again, we were skint. We needed more money, and I needed to do something else that I could work around childcare and everything. And so I think I've never stopped writing, but there are times when it's become more difficult. And anybody who wants to get published knows that, until you perhaps get some money for your books or an advance or a publishing contract, you're trying to do it around making a living, essentially, unless you're very lucky enough to be very, very rich and not have to worry about paying the mortgage and bills, etc. So it's a juggling act. I'm lucky enough to write full time now, but it wasn't always like that, and it's difficult sometimes to juggle those things, and you've got to really love it, and you've got to persevere, to keep going at it sometimes, I think, because there are times just like I haven't got enough time, and it feels like it's a bit of a luxury because you should be doing that's actually going to make some money, and rather than pootling around on sort of this idea you've got. So I've never stopped, but there have definitely been times when it's been more difficult than other times.
What about you, Nia?
Same. Since I've started pursuing it seriously, I've never stopped, but I've definitely had those times where it's been extremely challenging and extremely difficult. And I kid you not, I've laid in my front yard and looked up at the sky in a whole dramatic existential crisis because I'm extra and dramatic. And I've been like, why am I bothering? Like, where is this going? Like you said, like I'm literally squeezing in the time to, write a book to then query it and then maybe sell it around like husband and kids and a full-time job and just. So yes, and then of course, like I said, my family is very supportive and they're used to my shenanigans. So my husband or my sisters or my mom would always, march out into the front yard and be like, "Well, what is wrong with you? Get up and get it together. You'll be fine." But also those were very brief, fleeting moments because even the times that I was like, I'm done. Like the next morning I would wake up and I would have that, that compulsive need. Like, even when I say I'm done, I am not really done and I can't be done because the story and just, I guess, the passion and the love for writing just refuses to let me step away. And also I'm stubborn almost probably to a fault. So definitely when I was back quarrying and then subbing and me and my agent, and once I signed with my agent, it was kind of like, okay, so here's just all of these things that we're going to do, and we're going to we're going to keep grinding and throw something at the wall until one of them sticks and go from there.
What about you, Tom?
I've been quite lucky in how my career actually went. I can't remember how many years just learning how to write, but I was like an idiot. I was rewriting the same book and I hadn't quite finished the ending, but I was to teach myself how to do it. I was working on this book and then editing it and then rewriting sections and cutting bits out. So it was the start of a 6-book series. So frankly, I should have picked something that I could just be a throwaway novel. But instead, I didn't know about that, so I carried on going with this, and I finished it. I sent it to an agent, but okay, fine, put that behind me. I'll start writing something proper now. And then I got an agent for that book, which surprised me slightly. And then I got a contract, and so up until quite recently, I've been under contract ever since. So it's not really been something I can think that much about, actually having even a pause in writing. So the one time the one time I was properly sort of feeling burned out about it was after book 8, I think. And so I was, book 10. So I'd done 2 series. The second one had sold really badly. And so I was like pretty jaded about the whole situation anyway. So I wasn't sure exactly where I was going. And I wrote the first one for the new series. Like, okay, I really like this. This is good. Started writing the second one and just crashed. I've got nothing in the tank. Oh God, this is really not good news. And so stepped aside from it, and then for reasons I don't fully understand, wrote a different book. But one that was totally different. It was shorter, it was simpler, and so it was teaching me new things, and actually that's what I needed at the time. A rest probably would have worked, but it would have been less actually productive career-wise. So the only time I've actually not been writing is the last year. I've only just sort of come back to it really, partly because of lockdown stress, partly because of how my contracts have worked out, and actually working on a new book for that. I was very much in the situation of I can't really sort of bring the energy in lockdown to start a whole new fantasy series and do all the world building that is required for that. To do this job, to do this idea right, requires more than I've got. And so I just stepped aside, and then I got offered another freelance gig for my day job, and so I didn't have the time for it. And I hit September, and I'm so stressed. I've got all these physical symptoms of anxiety, and I've not written in ages. This is just not good enough. So my new gig, I basically said to them, you have to hire someone proper to do this. If it's me, that's fine. I'll quit my other job. If it's not me, that's fine. I can't keep doing all of this in one go because I'm doing a bad job all around. Unfortunately, they said, yes, please start working. So I've now, since December, I've cut down my hours. I'm in the new job, and it took about 2 weeks, I think, before my brain started going, so this idea that you had years ago, we could do this, we could do this. And I started basically thinking about it as I went to sleep and occasionally dreaming about it. And it was weird how my brain just went, okay, you've cut down your hours, there's now space to do this, you are going to start writing again. And so while I'm 100,000 words into a novel, I've started a whole new novel over Christmas because God knows why. But it's so much easier to write than a sort of complicated epic fantasy that I'm going to have to write the two in parallel, I think. But this one is actually, because it's a very simple book, I'm using it to get my mojo back before I can actually write the more complicated one. So yeah, I've done 20,000 words in January, I think. And at the end of the month, I'm going to switch back to the other one and use that momentum. But it was a weird time to actually spend almost a year not writing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, that kind of goes into my next question. And Zach, I'll start with you. So when you were working on your first book, or for any of you, if you're working on a second, third, fourth, etc., do you write that book all the way through, or do you do what Tom did and bounce back and forth between projects?
For the first book, because I wasn't under contract, I just focused solely on that. But I was lucky enough, Forge Books bought it as a part of a 3-book deal. So now I'm under contract to write multiple books, but I prefer to work on one project at a time. But that doesn't always work out. So like I'll turn in the manuscript for book 1, and then I start writing book 2, and then the edit notes for book 1 come back, and I have to pause my writing of book 2 and just work on that book 1 again. When I finish with that, I'll send it back and then go back to book 2. And I have to kind of do it that way. So it's sort of like working on 2 projects at once, but I have to focus on only one. So like I won't work on one project in the morning and then the next project in the afternoon, because my brain won't work that way. I'll end up writing the same story twice or the same feel twice. So, you know, that's something that it's, you know, I'm learning as I go, you know, how to do that a little bit better and be a little bit more streamlined. But that's kind of my process right now is, you know, just work on the project in front of me, but know that I might have to pause to go back to something else. And then when I do that, that's, you know, that's what I focus on until I turn that in. Then I go back to the next project and try to forget about what I just did and focus only on what's in front of me at the time. So
I gotcha. What about you, CJ?
I'm very similar to Zach, actually. I tend to write one thing at a time. And I'm when you're under contract, you kind of almost have to, because your time gets squeezed much more. You know, I'm on a book a year. I'm on my 3rd rounds of contract, if that is. I've had two book contracts with Penguin, UK and US. And I've just started sort of the 3rd contract. But, you know, you find your time is squeezed. So you really do have to concentrate on getting that one book written. And like you say, then that goes off to the editors. And then I tend to start straight away. I've nearly always got another new shiny idea that I want to write. And actually, if I started to try and write that or play around with that too much while I'm writing, you know, the book I'm currently sort of under contract to write, I'd kind of get a bit too tempted and distracted. So I like to keep that on the back burner as the thing to be excited about to do next, because I nearly always have an idea partway through one book that excites me, and then that becomes the next book generally. And exactly like Zach, once one manuscript goes off to be, you know, edited and torn apart by my lovely editor, who I always say manages to make me feel like the best writer in the world while telling me that I'm really not, with all her editorial notes. So she has that, and then when that goes away, I tend to start on the next project. That comes back with the notes, I work on that goes back again, because there's always more edits. And then I go back to do the new book. But yeah, I feel, you know, I kind of have to work that way, because there's never really any time in between. I have had a break this year, though, because the book that I was due to publish this January, due to various, as I say, I've never stopped writing, but interestingly, I had a terrible year in sort of 2020-21 with various things with lockdown and stress and homeschooling. And then I was trying to move my parents to be closer here. And then my dad died, and everything kind of happened at once. And it wasn't until I really struggled writing, really struggled. I used to get with this knot of anxiety in my stomach about sitting down at the laptop. And I'd never, ever had that before. And consequently, the book I finished, I wasn't happy with. And my editors, you know, obviously, you know, I could tell that they were a bit like, this needs a lot of work. And I had to say, do you know what? I can't go back to it. I actually cannot. I hate it. I hate that book. I cannot face editing it. I just want to put it to one side. And they very understandingly, because I had another idea I wanted to work on, said, okay, we're not going to publish that book this year. Work on sort of your passion project. We'll have lots of time on that to get that, you know, out for the next year. And also I'm now putting out a short story collection, which is something I really wanted to do, to kind of like, so I'm putting something out this year. But this isn't the question. But but yeah, basically, you can have sort of the best laid plans, but, you know, sometimes those things get thrown apart. Generally, it's one project at a time, because under contract, you find that you kind of really have to devote that time to that one book at a time. But yeah, then there's always the shiny new one to work on.
Yeah, there's always the new idea that pops in and be like,
a shiny new idea.
Great. Yeah.
Probably when you're having a rubbish time with the book you're writing, I think. And you're at that point where you're like, oh God, is any of this working? This is the worst book I've ever written. It's going to be a disaster. And then there's this shiny idea going, come write me instead. I'll be so easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Easy to write. It'll be wonderful. You're like, no, I mustn't listen to the shiny new idea, because I'll get halfway through that and it'll be just the same as the thing that you learn. So, yeah.
It's like, no, I'm not contracted for that one. I can't do that yet. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't have contracts, but I'm still very much I try to focus on one book at a time. So I sort of like, I'll try and get one written, and then, you know, I'll sort of like put that down, put it away, start writing something else. And then when I'm done with that, I'll go back to the first book and I'll be like, right, this now needs editing. So I'll do a few rounds of edits, send it off to, you know, an editor, get their notes back, and then edit that. And then when that's just about ready, then I'll move on to the next one I wrote, and then, you know, do the same editing with that, and then I'll start all over again, basically. So yeah, I still very much work with this, you know, one book at a time type of thing. I did try writing 2 at the same time last year, And it kind of worked in the fact that they were two very different books. So one was sort of quite dark, the other one was just a lot of fun, and I could kind of like write one in the morning and the other one in the afternoon because they were so different that it was such a change that it was refreshing. But then it was also just too much work. I was getting to the end of each day and I was just feeling absolutely run down, shattered, like no emotions left at all. So like my missus would be getting home and I'd just be sat on the sofa just dead-eyed and just be like, "You're not okay, are you?" I'm like, "What?"
What have you been doing all day? Writing 2 books?
Yeah. So she at some point she sat me down and just went, "You can't keep doing this. It's just too much work. Just slow down." So yeah, I won't be writing 2 at the same time anymore.
Lesson learned. What about you, Nia?
I am still learning my process. I prefer to work on one thing at the same time, but like it's been already been expressed. I'm under contract for multiple books across multiple genres and age categories. I have the Blood Trials as an adult science fantasy. We also just announced a YA speculative thriller. So I kind of work on the project that the deadline, like the most immediate deadline, demands me to work on. So if that's like I have to get this first draft turned in and sent to my editor by this date, then I'm going to do that, and then I'll pivot back and work on the line edits for this other thing that came in while I was working on it that has a later due date out. I've tried drafting twice, 2 stories at one time. I was like Rob, I was a zombie. I would wake up with a lot of steam at the beginning of the day and finish drafting that one project, and when I would try to take a break and draft the second one on, draft on the second project, I had no energy, no creativity, no vision, I was just done. I was like, no. I have found out that I can edit and draft at the same time. So it's a little bit easier. Writing takes more of my creative and mental energy for some reason than editing. So I can draft in the mornings and take an afternoon break, and then as long as it's not like, okay, I have to do an editing overhaul that's like redrafting, I can hop into line edits or lighter developmental edits on a completely separate project, but I can't draft 2 things at the same time.
Gotcha. Yeah, but I say you kind of get to that second project and you're just looking at the chapter header and you're just like, I know words should be filling up this page, but
but they're not.
I don't have it,
and I have no desire to make them go right now.
You just kind of start pecking on the keyboard, hoping something inspiring comes out. So as far as like writing schedules, so I mean, whether or not you're contracted for one or not, because I know Rob writes a lot of self-pub stuff. Do y'all have like a schedule where you write every day for a specific period of time? Or is it more a thing that you do just like when the idea or inspiration sparks? And CJ, I'll start with you.
I sort of have a schedule. I don't believe in things like word counts and stuff, because I think some days you could just spew out like thousands of words and get it down and you're on a real roll. And another day you might just find yourself like reworking just one page, because it just I'm not someone who edits as I goes, but sometimes you just can't find it. It's just not there. It's just not flowing, and I don't think you can force it sometimes. But I find I'm better in the mornings. I definitely rather get up and start early than work late. So normally after we've done the school run and stuff, I run every other morning. So sort of sometimes I'll sit at the desk straight away, and sometimes I'll go for a run and then come and sit at the desk. But I tend to fade by the afternoon. So by the time it's kind of time to sort of pick up my little girl from school, sort of 3-ish, I'm kind of fading on the creativity front a bit then anyway. And then it's kind of chaos for a bit anyway. And I might pootle again a little bit in the evening, but just little pootlings, tweaking things perhaps. So the majority of my writing tends to be in the morning to early afternoon. And then I can find out like the creative juices are just they're not there really as much anymore. But I don't, it's life gets in the way, doesn't it? Sometimes you've got appointments to do or something else happens, or, like when you're doing book promotion, you might, your schedule's completely thrown out and things like that. So I think, I try not to put too pressure really. I'm like, some days you might get a lot done. Some days you just don't. And I think for me, it makes it easier to accept that really, rather than saying rigidly, I must write this amount of words per day. Because I know that just doesn't work for me at all. It makes it feel like too much of a job, I think. So I'm more like go with the flow, and if you have a good day, you have a good day. And some days, you might not write a lot, but perhaps you've just unknotted that problem, or just got that really good start or end to a chapter. So as long as you've achieved something, I think that's the main thing, really.
Yeah. about you, Zach?
Yeah, kind of the same. I tried not to worry too much about word count because I know how many words I feel good with writing in a day, but if I focus like, all right, I'm going to sit down and I have to reach this many words, and it's a bad day where I just am not feeling it, sometimes it can feel daunting. Like, writing 250 words is better than writing no words. But if I'm like, I must write 2,000 words today, and I'm just like, I've got so much else going on, and I'm not, if I'm not one of those off days, I'm more likely to write nothing than to sit down for, however long it takes to just write a page, just write something. And for me, usually that first sentence or the first 2 sentences are the hardest part. Once I get those down, I can kind of just get stuff out. But yeah, I'm more creative in the morning. I like to read something else. I like to read recreationally in the morning, just for a little bit. It's sort of like an exercise, a warm up for my brain. I get I just see words on a page and it gets my brain tuned, and then I can put that aside and then I go do my writing. For most of the morning, usually about noon or early afternoon, I can stop. And like Nia was saying, that was a good point she made. I can draft new words in the morning and then do simple enough revisions in the afternoon. Like a certain type of revising, I can do both of those at the same time. Line edits or some small changes. I have a hard time writing 2 new things at once. But yeah, so mornings and word count, not too much. Sometimes if I give myself that leeway at the beginning of a project, I'll be more likely to go at it, right? Those what's that? The SMART goals concept, right? Set small, measurable, achievable goals that you can reach, and eventually you start building steam, and then my word count will go up, and then next thing you know, there's a whole manuscript. But if I'm too rigid on the rules, it could, kind of discourage me from starting even. But if I'm also, and the other side of that argument is if I'm not rigid enough with myself, if I don't say you must do this thing, then it's too easy to be like, I'll write tomorrow. Yeah, I only got to. It's all right, I'll do it tomorrow. And then before you know it, months have gone by, and you're like, shit, I haven't done anything. So it's
We're
still,
like,
I think
Bob, 5 years go by, and
5 years go by, and you're like, whoa. But yeah, it's a healthy balance. But I'm definitely more creative in the morning, and I don't know, if I write 2,000 words in a day, I feel good. If I write 250 words, like I said, it's better than no words. So I just try to just get a little bit every day for each day. There are at least 2 days a week or so that I don't do any writing. You have to take time for other things and give yourself that energy. I need time to create, I'm sure we've all heard the argument that some days you don't write any words, but you plot or you research or you brainstorm, and that feels like you're being lazy. But that's, to me, I believe that's part of the writing process. You have to have those raw materials to be able to form into a manuscript. So that's sort of my process.
Gotcha. What about you, Tom?
Well, I'm in the process of basically totally rebuilding my work schedule. When I started being published, they were writing my longest books of my career. And so I was very much, oh God, I've got a year to deliver this, and it's going to be 200,000 words, and I'm working full time. How exactly am I doing this? I'm very limited talent. So for quite a few years, I built myself a sort of structure of just aiming for 5,000 words a week. And it wasn't a major problem if I missed that, but I could have a good day, a bad day, a good day, and I'm fine on my target. And if I do roughly 5,000 words a week, I was going to be able to hit my deadlines. And so I worked along that schedule for quite a while. And now I'm older, I don't have to work in the same way. I've got children, so my day is much more structured because I've got the drop off at school. I'm picking them up at 5 o'clock. I'm basically stopping work and going to feed them, or maybe even talk to them sometimes. So life just sort of, it imposes this structure on you. But I found I've started writing in the morning. I used to be very much, I need 2 solid meals inside me before my brain functions, which is probably frustrating for anyone working with me in the mornings, but they slowly accepted I was just no use before lunchtime. And so I couldn't write anything until the afternoon. So when I was because I work from home most of the time, I would just do especially admin stuff and office work, and then try and take as much of the afternoon to write as possible. And these days it's much more sort of piecemeal, and yeah, because I've taken some time off from writing at all, and I'm building towards it. But I'm taking sections whenever I can, and it may be just it's 11 o'clock. I've got an hour until I'm going to stop for lunch. I'm going to write and just ignore the emails and everything, and that's actually working reasonably well for me. Now I'm in my 40s. I've been writing for over 20 years, and I hit 5, 6 o'clock, and I don't really have the energy to actually do anything useful. It used to be I was having come home from work, do an evening session, and at 11 o'clock having basically mainline coffee all the way through, I'd collapse into bed, and that would be all right. But I don't have that in the tank anymore, so I have to come up with a different way of doing it. So yeah, it's pieces whenever I can now, but fitting it around the job.
Gotcha. Nia, I'll get to you. I know you've got to run in a few minutes. So what about you?
I'm very goal and deadline oriented only because for two reasons. One reason is because I get massive anxiety whenever I'm staring down, the beginning of a new project or like new edits, and a way for me to like manage that anxiety and be like, okay, I know I can get this done is to take the entire chunk and break it down into smaller, measurable, achievable goals and be like, okay, so if I work every day and get 2K words done, I work every day and get however many pages edited, then by this deadline, it'll all be done without it feeling like this insurmountable hill. Also, I have 4 kids. They're 12, 9. I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I like to work every day, and I have to work every day because my family life is chaotic. And so, but that doesn't look like my idea regimented working every day. I mean, if I had my way, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd have a relaxing cup of coffee with solitude and quiet and peace. I'd like read or play video games or watch something to like Zach was saying, just to get the creative juices going for 30 minutes to an hour. And then I'd write from like the mornings to the afternoons. Be productive or not so productive, but at least give the time to it, and then relax. But that's not what any of my days ever it's more so like I'm waking up at 6 a.m. I'm getting the bigger children off to school dressed and doing the school runs, and then my husband works, so then I come home with the toddler and the infant, and I'm sitting down and I'm in the playroom with them and letting them toddle around while I open up my laptop with a coffee and peck away what my brain will allow me to focus on while the babies are doing their thing. And then I'll put them down for their nap around noon, and that'll give me a good 2.5 hours of quiet time. Let's go. And it's this time I have to fiercely guard and protect, to where I turn off my phone. I ignore my mom and my dad and my sisters, who of course want to call with a million things at that moment. I'm like, nope, be quiet, shut up. I can't talk to you right now. So for those 2.5 hours that I know is probably the only quiet time I'm going to get that day to just relax into writing and fall into the passion and like love it. I'll just go like full steam ahead. And then at that point, I'm doing school pickup, and every day. And you think at this point I would realize that it's a futile goal, but every day I say, okay, I'm going to get home and do dinner and homework and get the kids to sleep. And then I'm going to, get some more coffee and go around 9 and just go till about midnight. And I'm normally falling asleep as I'm putting the kids to bed, but literally every night I'm like, this isn't planned. Let's go for a second session. And it doesn't happen.
Yeah. It's like I tell myself like every evening and put my daughter to bed about 7:30. I'm like, I'm gonna be so productive the next 2 hours. About 8:30 hits, and I'm like, it's time to just go ahead and pass out. There's I have nothing left for the day. So,
see, I don't even have kids. I don't know my excuses.
And Nia, do you want to go ahead and tell everybody what you're working on? Because I know you gotta bolt.
Yeah, sure. I am. So the blood trials is out. Like I said, April 5th in the US, April 14th in the UK. In the UK, it's a blend of science fiction, fantasy. There's a little bit of like military fantasy, a little bit of a thriller element, a little bit of a mystery element. I like to blend genres. It's about a Black woman who grows up in this racist and sexist society that's kind of like is helmed by a military regime. She finds out that the powers that be killed her grandfather, who is kind of like the head of this society. And she decides to throw her lot into these deadly military trials in order to achieve the rank necessary to bring him justice. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm working on the sequel to that, which, you know, I have all these friends who have been here and they talk about the sequel curse, how it's so incredibly difficult to draft a sequel after your debut. And of course I was like, yeah, it'll be all right. That's not gonna be a me. I got this. And I quickly came to the realization, because I don't believe in curses, that it is a thing, and I should believe in curses because there is a thing called the sequel curse. And it's the most delightful but also the most terrible experience ever. So like I said, I'm coming up on like the last 50 pages, smoothing them out. And then also I just had a young adult speculative thriller announced set in a near future Atlanta that'll be out fall 2023. One best friend stalks another via social media and literally steals her body, and she has to figure out how to get her life and her body back.
Interesting. Well, awesome. Well, Nia, just thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
And, I know you're off to somewhere a lot warmer and nicer, but hopefully you can get your edits and so forth done and go enjoy some sunshine. So
Yes.
Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.
This was fun.
Bye.
All right, Rob, I want to come back to you about the whole, you know, working through and, you know, do you bounce back and forth? Which I know you already said that you've worked on 2 at once, and that didn't really vibe. But you know, as far as your writing schedule, do you have a schedule? Do you have a word count? So, you know, and I'll go back to what CJ says. You know, she doesn't really look at word counts. I know there are authors that they only write 200 words a day, and then there are authors that write, you know, a couple thousand. Or there's some authors. I remember last year's convention, or might have been 2 years ago. Time is nothing now. That Elena Boyden was talking about writing, I think, like 13,000 words in a weekend. So there are also those kind of authors that just like chunk it all in a couple of days. But what kind of is your schedule like on a daily basis, or do you have a consistent schedule as far as writing?
Well, I like Tom. I'm actually in the process of just changing it a little bit to be a bit more healthy, because basically I did have a schedule, and it was a schedule that worked really well for me. It was basically wake up at sort of like 8 o'clock. I'd be working by 8:30 because I don't have kids and I work at home, so it was literally roll out of one room into the other. Then I'd stop at sort of 10:30, take the dog for a walk, come back, do a bit more work, have some lunch, do a bit more work, blah, blah, blah. But basically over the past couple of years, since lockdown really, I started falling into very unhealthy patterns where I'd just be trying to work harder and work longer. And I'd be like, okay, well, how about I just work a bit longer and, you know, and we'll get a few more words down. So, you know, I'd be, instead of looking at a 2,000 word day thinking this is a good day, I'd be looking at a 2,000 word day going, it's not very good. You know, last day, you know, yesterday was 3,000. And then that moved up to sort of like, okay, what about 4,000? And then, you know, you'd occasionally have a really good day, and then your brain would be like, so you can do 5,000 in a day. Keep going.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and basically it led to the end of last year. I burned out basically, and I just couldn't. I was having more bad days than good days, and it was really unhealthy. So I haven't actually written anything for a good month at this point, which is incredibly strange for me. And I'm in the process of just trying to relax and figure out a new schedule that I can stick to and that isn't going to drive me into the ground, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that's going to look at the moment, but I can say this: it will still contain beagle walks.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I know, you know, we've talked about stopping writing and come back to writing, but I'm curious because it's been a conversation I've had with a lot of authors over the past couple of years since I started doing my chats. You know, with the overlooming pandemic and all of the lockdowns and everything that we've had, you know, I know a lot of writers have struggled because, you know, they used to have a routine where they would like go out and be able to write, you know, with sunshine and so forth, and it'd be a better experience writing. And now, you know, you're kind of confined into a certain area. Have you found it a lot more difficult? And have you kind of come out of that funk since we have been going through this for so long? Or do you feel like it's still kind of there? Or have you not experienced it at all? Have you always been an introvert at heart and this has just been fine? Tom, I'll ask you.
I am an introvert at heart, and I'm quite used to working from home. I mean, for the past 13 years, I've been pretty much one day a week in London, and then the rest of the time from my office here. So it should have been fine, but actually lockdown hit, and A, the stress of it all, and just not knowing what the hell was going on, and B, having 2 children at home who really didn't understand what was going on, but then needed homeschooling and just needed entertaining, and didn't understand that they couldn't just wander out and come and visit me in the office. That messed everything up. So I should have been sort of absolutely fine with the whole sort of routine, because I'm basically doing everything I was doing before. But it certainly threw me to one side. For the book I'll be going back to. My agent's been waiting for it for a while. It should be the first book he actually gets to sell for me, and I had to just step aside from it and say I can't do this. So I'm going to do something that I can finish in 2020, and that was fine. Except the book sort of whether it was, I don't think it was deliberate, but the very rough idea is being the main character is stuck in somewhere and desperate to get out. And so writing that during lockdown, I had the idea years before, but clearly it's a bit fitted together. And that's that sort of combined with just the general anxiety of everything going on and extra work meant that actually I was finding it incredibly hard to do, because I was feeling very anxious, especially in a book where the main character is meant to be feeling anxious most of the way through it. So I was living far too much of it. And it's weird because I've done a Spotify soundtrack for it. Just to put on all the music I was listening to, because it's SF rather than fantasy. All my writing music was then basically wrong. I needed something that's much more sort of electronica and less melodic. But while I was editing the book, I sort of put the soundtrack on, was listening to, because this is what I was listening to day in, day out, and I could feel like the tension immediately hitting my chest, because I've been conditioned over this whole time to just feel stressed and tense while writing this book. And so, like CJ said about your book, it was weird just feeling tense with it. And actually, I think I put some of that tension into it, but I had to have periods where I was just going, yeah, I can't do this.
What about you, Rob? I'll come back to you. Did he freeze for everybody else?
He's just really thinking about it. He's formulating an answer here.
That was weird. Okay, I'm back. Everything went blank for a moment there, and I had lots of little loading circles. Right, I don't know where everybody was. Anyway, it had more of an effect. The pandemic had much more effect than I ever thought it was going to, basically. Because I thought it would be nice and easy, and it certainly was at the start. I could get more done. Everything was quiet. I live in a very noisy area, and like lockdown here, and I was like, silence. It was brilliant. But no, it sort of accrued over time, that sort of not being able to go out, not being able to socialize, to not going, like nipping down the pub for a couple of pints with friends. Like after you've not done that for 6 months, a year, you start to really miss it. And it's that little bit of socializing, even if it was only an hour or two, a little bit of socializing every week. And if that's just robbed of you, it's the stress just doesn't seem to have anywhere to go. So it just keeps building. So it definitely had a big effect for me there. And part of that was, it also led to the fact that I was then, I've not got anything else to do. I'll just work a bit harder. I'll just do more rather than sort of like taking more time to rest and relax and everything. So yeah, it was wonderful when it started off having a nice lockdown, but after a while it just got to the point where it was just like, okay, this is having a serious effect on my mental health, basically.
Yeah. I felt like for a few months there, it was like, okay, this isn't gonna be that bad. Like we'll get through it. and then we'll get back to normal. And then it just kind of kept. It was just like this 3 to 6 month periods. It just kept repeating. Yeah, I completely understand. Yeah, because I've been home since March of 2020, and it's just working here, and I'm just like the only way like that I had socializing was like Zoom calls with work, and then like doing the author chats. And I was like that because my friends are doing the same thing. They've got kids, and they don't want to expose them. So yeah, I can't imagine that. That's probably why I haven't really written a whole lot. I've started several things and just like can't get back to them because I just don't have the headspace for it. Plus, I've got a lot of other things, and Rob's got his beagle. So, what about you, CJ?
Yeah, like Robert, at the start, actually, I really welcomed it in a weird way. I'm actually quite an introvert. I can go out there and be very social, but quite frankly, I could go for ages without seeing another living human being, and I'd be perfectly happy. Aside from my nearest and dearest, we live in quite a rural area, so as well, our closest neighbours are sheep, which is great. And also, I'd done a lot of travelling for the Chalkman and my second novel, Taking You Annie Gone. I'd done a lot of promotion, a lot of travelling, a lot of planes, a lot of trips up and back to London, and just it was quite constant. And so actually, I was quite pleased to start with that I didn't have to do all that travelling anymore. I had a great excuse. I could just be at home with Betty and my husband, and the homeschooling was a bit of a pain in the ass. But, it was nice weather, and we're very lucky to live in a lovely rural area. We've got a nice garden and everything. So we were very fortunate in that respect. And at the start, it seemed, I was like, yeah, this is fine. Actually, I'm getting quite a lot of work done. Don't have to do all the traveling. This is great. As it went on, and then there became added stresses, though. I think that's the thing. Because my dad at the time was in a nursing home. So, when we couldn't see him, that became an added sort of stress. So, we would have to send letters and like parcels and things to him because he wasn't able to. My parents are very tech ready. He couldn't use Zoom and stuff. He just struggled with his little mobile phone. So, not being able to see him was difficult. My mum was on her own. So, I was doing a lot of traveling between where we live, where they live, over sort of the other side of the coast, sort of 2 or 3 hour journey each way. And so I was traveling back and forth a lot once we could, because we were then in a bubble, of course, me and my mum, because she was on her own, to make sure she was okay. And then it became a situation that I needed to move them both closer to me. So trying to do all of those things in lockdown, with my dad not very well and my mum struggling with finances in the house, that all became quite difficult, trying to organise all those things while we were still in lockdown. And the whole situation kind of got more and more stressful towards the end of the year. So yeah, again, a bit like it started off with me thinking this will all be fine. But then, as it went on for longer, and then we had a bit of freedom, then we locked down again, it all got a lot more difficult, I think. And I didn't necessarily miss the socialising as such. But I suppose perhaps, you do a bit, even if you don't realise it. It's just those little bits of normality, I guess. I used to go and write in coffee shops quite a lot prior to the pandemic. I still haven't got back to that. I mean, I'm lucky I've got quite a nice writing space here now, which I love. But it's those little bits of normality, isn't it? And you kind of don't realise you actually are missing them in a way. So, yes, I think even though you don't know, perhaps it's taking a toll, actually, as I found with writing that book I tried to write during lockdown, it was taking its toll. I just didn't really realise it.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of like creeping back there. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Zach?
Yeah, a lot of writing is observing, right? So going out into the world and having interactions with other people, or seeing different things, or visiting cities, or like CJ was saying, flying to a new city. The energy you get from that feeds creativity, and without that, I mean, at first it's fine. I'm fine being by myself. I do like to interact with people. I like to interact with to an extent. I wouldn't call myself a social butterfly, but I do like going out and, changing the scenery a bit. So at first you're great. Okay. I'm going to have so much time to focus and I'll be home, but then it becomes problematic. You start to almost like stagnate, and it took some effort to separate home from work. So like I'm in my office right now, and I can sit here and twiddle around on YouTube or I can read a book or play a video game or watch TV or do anything other than work on the project I need to work on, but all from this exact spot that I'm in. And it takes effort to switch mental gears like that. And yeah, it gets old. I mean, it's funny thinking about traveling now, it's like I forgot how do you plan these things? How do you go somewhere else? How do I get outside? There's
What goes in my suitcase? I don't.
Yeah.
I
Oh
don't
my
even
God.
know.
What? Yeah. Do I need a toothbrush? Is that I don't know. Yeah. It's
People still brush their teeth.
Yeah. Yeah. Are we still doing that? Is that a thing? That'd be great. But yeah. It just, and I because again, like I said, I had a career change right at the beginning of this going under contract and getting published journey that I'm on, and the work schedule changed completely. And I thought, well, all right, we'll do this, and I'll have time. I can go right I can leave home and go right in a coffee shop or something like that. But we're not doing that. We're not seeing new movies and not interacting with people. It can be tough. I'm ready for things to go back to. I mean, they won't ever be back to the way they were. But let's get I like anybody. We're all ready for to be done with all of this. But it does. I found for myself, it takes a little bit more effort to get creative. I mean, I might have to go outside and go for a run, or just walk through the woods, or do something to get out of the house and be like, all right, I've gotten out of the house. It's okay to go back to the house and now do the things that I need to do, and put a little bit more effort into trying to interact with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha. Last question I got for you guys, and then we'll go into what you're working on now. So when you're going into a new project, what do you need to get started? Do you outline? Do you just go with an idea, or is it somewhere in between, or is it somewhere completely out in left field? Rob, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I am a complete pantser or gardener, basically. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to say. Oh, right. There we go. Big Zillow.
Oh, bless! You're so gorgeous. Oh, I love a woofer. Chocolate Labrador, but she's downstairs because that's where the food is at the moment.
Yeah. Well,
I think we saw an ear a second ago, and then she threw back upstairs.
This is why she's come upstairs, because it's getting close to her feeding time. So she's like,
feed me. I know the time.
Anyway, right. The question, yes. Always a good fan favorite when you pick up a beagle for the spoon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I'm a complete pantser and gardener, especially for the first book of the series. When I start a project, I tend to have a general idea, like one of the ones I've got at the moment is this big sort of sprawling epic fantasy, and the idea just formed from, okay, what about a magic system where people gain like powers and strength and everything from eating angels? And that was about as much as I had when I sat down to write it. And there we go. That was a 220,000 word book in the end, I think. So I had no idea. I just sit down and I just start writing, and it all just flows very naturally. I add things in, and then I figure I'll make it all fit later. It's like, this sounds cool, I'll add it in, and then somehow try and make it all work. And to be honest, I think that's part of what I love about writing. It's the exploration of it for me. It's this idea of, I don't know where a story is going to take me until I sit down and I start writing it, and it tells it to me as I'm sort of writing it in a way. It's like it's really plumbing the depths of my imagination just to sort of find out where it's going to take me, and I love that. I love that journey, that exploration for it. Things are a little bit different with later books in series. I do a bit more planning for books 2 onwards. And I'm about to sit down and start writing a book 5 in a series. And there's a hell of a lot more already planned for that than I would usually go in with, because there just kind of has to be. So yeah, but for the first book in a series, for a new project, it's very much just here's an idea. Let's put fingers to keyboard and see where it takes me.
Gotcha. What about you, CJ?
I am absolutely the same. I can't think of anything worse than sitting down and having to plan out a book, because I'd be bored to tears before I started. And then I wouldn't stick to it anyway, and it would be an absolute waste of time. I'm very much like, I like to just have an idea, something's inspired me, get those first lines down, and then it's that excitement of exploration of a new project. And then you find yourself going off on tangents and, oh my God, I didn't think of doing that. I thought I was going to go this way, but actually I'm going to go this way now. And the characters kind of drive it quite a lot. And I think, particularly if you're writing a thriller or a mystery that's got lots of twists and turns, inevitably what you find yourself doing is I'll have, I could do this instead, or I could kill this person instead. And that would make it more interesting. And then you go back and you sort of fix a lot in the edit, really. You go back and plant bits in that need to be planted at the beginning because you've changed stuff further on. And there's a lot of construct in the edit, but that initial exploration, and it's exciting, and finding out where the story's going to go, I find keeps it really interesting for me. But having said that, on the book that I'm working on now, which will be the Drift, published in 23, I did have, it was much more structured than I normally when I write, I don't even bother correcting typos. I literally call it a vomit draft to get the first draft down. I just get it all on the page and I don't really stop. I might stop halfway and go back and tidy a bit, but not a lot. But this one, because of the structure of the book, because of the nature of the book, it did require a little bit more structure and a little bit more planning. I actually knew exactly kind of how it was going to work. It sounds like I didn't know exactly how things were going to end, but I knew precisely with this one. There was a very precise kind of twist or part way through that had to be worked around. So I did have to structure it a little bit more. But that worked for this particular book. The next one will probably be completely different again. So, I couldn't sit there. And I know some people, they have like pin boards and things, and they have all these chapter plans and everything. And I'm like, that sounds like a nightmare to me. That's awful. So
you have people that spend like 10 years writing out lore for their entire series.
I mean, you could have written the book. What
What about you, Tom?
I'm probably a bit more structured, but not a vast. I mean, largely I want the premise and I want to start writing something just to sort of see how it actually sort of works, like in contact with the page. But because I like the puzzle of the book, I'll usually fairly quickly on there, I will start scribbling. So I've got stacks of notebooks like that, and I will start filling pages of that with absolute rubbish. And mostly it's stuff that is not going to be in the book, I basically never reread it. It's just as well because I can't read my handwriting. But once I've got the idea in my head, it's fine and I can write it. But there will be pages and pages of just, what if this best could go here. And anyone who's like stole my notebooks and tried to recreate one of my novels would come up with 15 different books, none of which made any sense, because it's all just, maybe I could do this. And once the idea is right, I don't bother writing it down because it's in my head and it stays there. So it's all the sort of the failed ideas that go into that. The one I'm doing at the moment, or we'll stop at the end of the month, was very much the idea of that short story I wrote once. Maybe you combine it with that dream you had 20 years ago and see where we go with that. And that was basically the limit of what I got. So I just started writing chapters and went, this is going really easily. I don't know what the plot is yet, but let's just carry on. And normally I have more of a structure to that. And I've probably got about half the book in my head now. So I think I know another, 20, 30,000 words worth. But where it goes from there, I don't know. And once I switch books back to the other one, which I've got very clear, I may have, my brain will probably just sort of keep ticking over in the background and it'll fit the pieces into place and I'll fill up more pages of notebooks. And then I'll probably have most of an idea by the time I get back to it. But who knows? If I don't, then it's less scary than it used to be. I did one book where I did one novella where almost nothing was planned. It very much, I was doing it as a writing exercise effectively. So just the first thing that comes into your head, put that on the page and then carry on from there. And so I then did that with this one and I had two ideas which I combined. And then I just tried to see where it took me, to the point of there's a major sort of plot point and world building point, which I put in because I couldn't be bothered to do any research. And so I said, effectively, they use magic guns, and so I can't be bothered to read up about flintlocks and wheel locks and work out how everything works, because someone knows this so much better than me, and I really don't like researching things. So I'll put magic in, and I'll work out how it works later, and it then fed into everything else. But I had no idea what I was doing at the time. It just seemed like a good idea. But you got to sow the seeds.
Yeah. What about you, Zach?
I have to do Both. I mean, I have to have a plot or an outline to guide me. Otherwise, I'll just, be aimless. But I also like to leave myself enough room to be creative in the process. So what I do is I have a rough outline with like tent pole ideas. Like I know this is pivotal scene, this pivotal scene, and this pivotal scene need to happen. But I leave myself the creative room to kind of pants the in between spaces there. My first book, Wake of War, it was the first drafts. I mean, it's a very character driven story, but it was very character driven to the point where I had to put a lot of effort into like working a coherent plot into it. And the next project I'm working on, it's a separate project altogether. I try to do the opposite, and I focused on the plot and have to work to put more character driven and more of the other speculative parts into it. So, what's that adage that you never learn how to write a book, you just learn how to write the book you're working on. Everything's going to be different, but I know for myself, I need some sort of guidepost to follow, or I might get 60, 70, 80,000 words into a thing, go, what the hell, and have to start all over, and that is terribly daunting, and I don't want to end up there. But yeah, a healthy mix of both, a rough outline, and then leave myself room to be a little creative in the in between spaces. But for the most part, I like to kind of have a general idea of where I'm going and how it's going to end.
Gotcha. So that's all the questions I got for everybody. So I want to take this last couple of minutes just for everybody. I know we kind of touched on it quite a bit throughout the entire session, but what do you have what are you working on currently? And is there like one book from another author that you would recommend to everybody? And Tom, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm working on two. So one is a contemporary fantasy, which I've got half a plot for. And the other one is much more of a traditional epic fantasy called Oakfall, which I don't have a publisher for yet, but my agent has been waiting for it for quite a while now. I'm definitely going to start writing it again soon. So yeah, that is it's big. It's not that bloody, I suppose, by the standards of some of my books, but I'm describing it to people slightly flippantly as Jedis versus zombies, in the epic fantasy. But so it's a little more than that, but that's the fun way of describing it to myself, which God knows when that'll be done. As for a book to recommend to people, God, I am currently reading the second of Robert Holdstock's Mythago Wood books, the Lavenders, which is just great. And yeah, definitely recommending that to everyone.
All right. What about you, CJ?
I have I'm just finishing off the short story collection that's coming out this autumn. And that is called A Sliver of Darkness. And I'm really chuffed with that. I love short stories, love reading them, love writing them. And yeah, it was a real privilege to get to do that. I'd always wanted to do short story collection, so I'm chuffed to bits with that. And yeah, the new novel, The Drift, is out in January 2023. So yeah, it's. I mean, if people have loved my previous books, I hope they'll love this. It's slightly different. I pitched it to my agent as a triple locked room mystery / post-apocalyptic horror thriller. So she was like, "Yo, okay." So it's got sort of elements of that locked room. There are 3 separate locations: a crashed coach, a stranded cable car, and this isolated chalet in some kind of snowy wilderness, where there are 3 groups of people sort of trapped separately. And we know there's a killer abounding, but we also know there's something also very, very scary and terrifying outside these locked room mysteries that's kind of pivotal to the story as well. So there's a lot more going on than you initially think about why these disparate groups of people are all trapped, and who the killer is and what's going on around them in this sort of greater world picture. So I've had a lot of fun with that because it's something different. And I think, if you're like me, I can't write series. I like each book to be different. And I think I also like, the challenge of having a whole new playground each time. And I get very bored if I'm sort of made to do the same thing again and again, which, my publishers have been very good, actually, because I think when I initially spoke to them about this book, it was quite different to the previous books. And I was a bit and they might say, no, we want to keep writing this sort of thing, but they've been really accommodating on it. They're probably a bit nervous now they've read it, so we shall see. So there, that's me, and a book to recommend. My reading has been incredibly slow this last year. Actually, my reading really did suffer over the pandemic. But a perennial favourite, a great book, The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stu Turton, which is just a cracking book from 2018. Kind of Quantum Leap meets Agatha Christie, probably the best way to describe it, I guess. But it's a great book. It's one of my all-time faves.
Awesome. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, I'm currently working on Sins of the Mother, which is book 4 of the War Eternal, which is my sort of it's Eska. She's a ball of hate and rage, and she's wonderful to write. In fact, I've got artwork. Oh, it's beautiful. Anyway, so I'm working on I've written book 4, Sins of the Mother. That's coming out on May the 3rd. And I'm going to be starting work on the 5th and final book of that series this year as well. And at some point this year, I also have a progression fantasy novel coming out called Titan Hovers, which is kind of like, it's been described as Space Hulk from Warhammer 40k meets, like shonen anime. So that's a hell of a lot of fun to write. It's very sort of big powers and all sorts of craziness and great fun. But I don't know when that's releasing yet because I haven't decided. At some point this year.
That's the best part about being your own boss, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'll release it at some point. It's fine. When I figure out what I want on the cover and stuff, who knows?
There you go. Whenever you figure out what Felix is going to do. And by the way, Felix Ortiz did that cover. You can see very plainly right behind Rob. He does such fantastic work. So
Felix does pretty much all my covers these days.
Yeah.
Hire him for everything.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Zach, what about you?
My debut comes out this year. It's a near future military thriller about a second American Civil War and the people who fight in it as they struggle to come to terms with just who or what it is they're actually fighting for. That'll be out July 19th from Forge Books. And the next project I'm working on, Wake of War, is a standalone. The next project is something entirely different, but it's I don't know how much I can or should, how much detail I can go into, but it's a science fiction action thriller that I am sort of pitching as like a Jack Reacher meets Metal Gear Solid with a healthy dose of Blade Runner. I don't know if that's too many, but I'm going to throw them in there because no one can stop me right now. But yeah, so that's what I got going on right now. If I have to recommend, well, I don't have to recommend a book. I happily recommend Michael Mamay's Misfit Soldier. Actually comes out February 2nd, early next month.
Like very soon, yeah.
Yeah, really soon. I was lucky enough to get an early copy and read it, and I mean it's a great, fun action sci-fi, military sci-fi. If you've read any of his PlanetSide series, you'll know his style. This one's something different, but thoroughly enjoyed that one. It's a good new story from Michael. So yeah, Misfit Soldier.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thank y'all so much for taking the time and coming to chat about why you write and why you continue to write and why you just have all such amazing novels that are out and coming soon. So just thank y'all so much. Thank you everybody that's tuned in to the panel. Really appreciate all the comments in the sidebar. And y'all continue to enjoy the rest of TBRCon. We've got several more days, several more panels coming up. And definitely go and buy all of these authors' works. All of their website links are below the channel video. And yeah, we'll see y'all on social media. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
See ya.
Bye.